Welcome to CyberGuide Live Chat 4. Again, my name is Lauren, and I will be kind of walking you through resources tonight. Now, for those of you that gave me an exclamation point in that chat who have not been to a live chat before, I just want to let you know what it is. So live chats are an opportunity for eCYBERMISSION students and team advisors to learn about a specific topic that relates to eCYBERMISSION, or in some cases get some inspiration on STEM careers. So tonight we'll be focusing on eCYBERMISSION and resources that you might need for your mission folder. But the reason we call this a CyberGuide live chat is we have CyberGuide volunteers joining us tonight who are STEM experts. And we're gonna ask them some questions and hear some of their stories about strategies that they use when looking for resources as well. So I know we have a couple cyber guides on tonight. If you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself and just saying hello, let's start with Ryan.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ryan. I'm an engineer at the U.S. Army Research Lab, and I'm a cyber guide as well. So looking forward to speaking with y'all.
Thanks, Ryan. And then we have cyber guide Aiden Relay on. Aiden Relay, if you would unmute yourself and just say hello and what you do.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adenrele Adebisi. I'm a research physician. I'm also a cyber guide, and I'm here as a resource today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining. And I believe we have cyber guide Ronnie online too. Ronnie, would you say hello and tell us what you do?
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so I'm so sorry. I'm stuck in traffic right now, so I'm actually on a Zoom call while I'm driving. I
Be
will be back
careful.
in about 15 minutes, and I will join you guys and introduce myself then, if that's okay.
That is fine. We want you to be
I'm
safe.
trying not to crash.
Yeah, be safe. Thanks for joining.
Okay,
All
yeah,
right.
we'll be back shortly, I promise.
Sounds good. All right, everyone. So thank you again for joining. Let's jump right in. We're going to talk just a little bit about resources for your mission folder. So as your team is making your mission folder, you are, of course, doing a STEM project that's going to benefit your community in some way. And one of the requirements for submitting that mission folder in March is that you have to have some sources that you've done research on. So this could be related to your project in some way. For example, if you're doing a project that involves maybe designing an app on your phone, you might want to have some sources related to that. Or if you're designing some sort of prototype, specifically designed to do something like maybe something that takes algae out of the surface of a lake, for example, you might want sources about why having algae in a lake is bad. So that's kind of how the source system works for eCYBERMISSION. One of the things that we like to let our students know about is that we do expect 10 sources in your mission folder. And one of the easiest ways to find those sources is to look online. The thing with sources, though, is that you've got to be really careful about its credibility. And that just means you have to make sure that that source is reliable and has been reviewed by experts. So it's important to investigate those sources carefully. And just because it appears online in a search bar doesn't mean it's credible. So you got to make sure that you have a few key things checked off your list of a credible source. When you're investigating sources, one of the things that might come up really quickly on your search is something from Wikipedia. Now, Wikipedia is not considered a reliable or credible source, and that's because anybody can edit whatever is listed in Wikipedia. So we got to make sure that those sources are investigated carefully, and you got to make sure that they are reliable and credible. So cyber guides who are on, do you have any experience or tips for students as they're looking online for credible sources?
Yeah, so as far as like credible sources, like So a lot of scientists, and even at the Army Research Lab, like when we have research findings, we often publish them in journal articles. And journal articles are peer reviewed traditionally, which means like we submit it to a group of other scientists in our field, and they look it over to make sure that it's credible and the results make sense. And that's often like a safety check that makes sure that the research is like a good resource going forward to use. So that's just an example, like journal articles, research papers, things like this are usually really good sources.
Oh, that's perfect. I love that. It's nice to kind of know where to start. So another great way to kind of figure out from the beginning if your source is reliable is just asking quick questions about it. So you can ask maybe who wrote the source? Are they reliable? Are they credible? Where is the information located? Is it a website? Is it an article online? Is it from a print magazine? Is it from a book? Finding out where that source is located is helpful. And then you have a few other questions you can ask, maybe which website hosts that information? What's the purpose of the source? Who's the audience? And when was it published? Is it recent? That's really important if you're looking for online sources, is looking at the date when it was published. So anything recent is kind of considered in the last 1 to 3 years, but we really do encourage like the most recent articles, meaning maybe if that website is less than a year old, that's really good. So make sure you ask those questions like who's the audience, who's it written for, where is the source located, and when was it written? Now, when you look at source credibility, if you're looking at the author, you want to make sure that they have valid credentials. So maybe make sure that they are an expert in what they're talking about. If you're looking at a website article, it's really helpful to look at the URL, that actual web address, to make sure it's from a reliable organization. And then, of course, like I mentioned, having a recent date is really important too. And on that bottom right of the screen, you see I've got .edu, .gov, and .org. Those are really good websites to cite as a source if you're looking for credible sources. If that site you're looking at has .edu, .gov, or .org in it, chances are that's going to be a very credible and reliable source. So pay attention to the web URL. And also note, you can use online journals and magazines. So if you're looking at magazines, think maybe Smithsonian or National Geographic or things like that. So just want to note, if any of you have questions while I'm talking about sources, feel free to put those questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand and ask that question as well. We did get a question in the chat. Are we going to use databases for sources? And that's really up to your team. So whichever kind of method you use to find sources is really up to you. We're going to talk a little bit about a database that's helpful to use that you can find online in just a minute. But I want to give our cyber guides a chance to talk a little bit about source credibility. Have you guys ever had experience looking through maybe a print article or a magazine and then trying to find one of those sources online? I know a lot of us are using the web sources more and more these days. Do you have any tips on finding online journals or magazine articles that are credible?
Yes, you can use Google Scholar. It has credible articles because most of the articles there are peer reviewed, like Ryan mentioned earlier. And that way, you know, the people that contributed to it have the expertise to do so.
That's an amazing tip. In fact, I love that you mentioned Google Scholar, because that is going to come up really soon in my slides. So we are going to quickly just talk about what might indicate that a source isn't credible before we move on to our database and Google Scholar slides. So kind of warning signs, if you're doing some online research, you see something that's out of date, that's definitely a red flag. We also want to really enforce that we're not going to use posts from social media. So no Facebook or Instagram posts will count towards sources. Also, if it's a personal blog, that's not going to be a reliable source. And as a rule, it's best to stick with websites that end in .edu, .gov, or .org, and be really careful with those websites that end in .com or .net. Now, like CyberGuide Aiden Relay mentioned, Google Scholar is an amazing resource for your team to use as you're looking for sources. You can type that into your search bar right now, and it's going to give you some really cool results. So if you want to go to Google Scholar, you can type in let's say you want to type in algae bloom. You can type that into your Google Scholar search bar, and you'll get a lot of results that are credible and peer-reviewed about that specific topic. Now, if you already have your topic selected for your eCYBERMISSION project, you can just type in whatever you're researching into Google Scholar and see what you find. That's going to be a really helpful resource for you all to use. So I'll go ahead and put the link for that in the chat as well. Is scholar.google.com. So let me make sure I'm putting it in the correct spot. There we go. All right, so that is just a really quick rules of thumb, what to look for a credible source, how to make sure you use online research reliably. You can use Google Scholar, you can look for websites that end in .org, .gov, and one of the things that you'll need to think about as you're collecting those sources is how you're going to reference them or cite them. So when we talk about citing sources, that just means how is it going to be recorded in your mission folder. So typically, we don't have select rules about how you cite your sources, but it's a good rule of thumb to use MLA format. So you can put that into your Google search bar, MLA, that'll tell you a little bit about how to actually list your source. So maybe where you put the date it was published, where you put the title. But for your mission folder, a team's going to need at least 10 different sources. So this could be websites, like we've talked about. It could be books or periodicals or journals that you find at the library, or it even could be an ebook or an e-journal. So it could be many different formats, but you'll need at least 10 sources that somehow relate to your project. So we recommend citing your sources in MLA format, which you can actually put into your search bar if you want to see any examples. And one of the things that we really recommend is that you kind of start keeping a track of what sources you are using from the very beginning where you start your research. So say that you were doing some research a couple weeks ago about what you wanted to make your project about, and maybe you don't remember that website. It's important to kind of save those so that you don't have to rush to figure out those sources last minute when you're submitting your folder in March. So kind of from the beginning stages of your research, just remember to record those sources somewhere as you discover them. You can record them in like a Google Doc that your team shares, or just like a notepad app on your phone, or just somewhere where you can keep track of those sources so you don't have to rush to find the answer. So we did get a question in the chat. Does the project or problem that you're solving have to be in your own town or city, or can my team choose a problem out of state? That's a great question. So for eCYBERMISSION, we really do like to emphasize solving problems kind of in your own community. But that said, we understand that some problems can be relatable to places other than your city or your state. So you can definitely kind of move beyond your backyard, but we really do like to emphasize maybe how your solution could affect your own city, school, or state as well. So there might be some questions in your mission folder specifically about how your project might help your town or city, but certainly that could be applied elsewhere. Great question. All right, so remember, from the beginning stages of your research, cite those sources as you discover them instead of waiting till the very last minute. And then, great question, how do you cite a website? We'll show you how. So this is going to be following that MLA formatting here. You're going to want the author, editor name, the title of that web page, the company that posted the page, and the date that you last looked at the page. So that's kind of a good rule of thumb, what to look for when you're citing online sources. And then of course you're going to need the URL because otherwise you wouldn't be able to find that link. Now we did get a question in the chat about what MLA stands for. So that is the method of recording where you found the source. That just stands for Modern Language Association. So I'll put that in the chat for you here. MLA stands for Modern Language Association. And that's a very popular way to cite sources in an academic way. All right, so I do see we have Cyber Guide Ronnie who just joined us. I'm so glad you made it safely. I wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself, and if you have any tips for students on finding sources, we'd love to hear them.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I got back safely in one piece. So
Yay!
thankfully. Hi everyone. My name is Ronnie. I'm a PhD student in neuroscience at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, which explains why I am late to everything because people can't drive here. I study neuroscience and my project focuses on kind of an intersection between lots of coding and lots of biology, so lots of technical stuff and lots of biologically relevant stuff. In terms of any tips, I don't actually know what you guys have gone through already, so I will probably chime in and answer any questions you have and let Lauren keep talking.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ronnie. Glad you made it home safe. So we thought we was just talking about a little bit about online sources. So let's talk about those print sources too. Now, we know that a lot of us are using digital or online sources a little more, but in case you're grabbing a book from your library, this is how you're going to cite those print sources. So you'll need kind of the same information that you would for a website. You'll just need the author name, the title, the date that book or magazine or article was published, the publishing company, and the volume number if it's from a magazine or encyclopedia. And then of course you'll need that page number. So this is just a rule of thumb on how to print, how to source, cite books or magazines. And you can find all of this on Google if you just type in MLA cite book or magazine. So for those of you that are wondering what to investigate, maybe you haven't quite got to the research phase yet because you're still thinking about what your project is going to be about, I want to give you some resources. So if you're still thinking about where to start, it's good to think about problems in your own community. Make sure that your idea or experiment hasn't been done before. It's important to create something new. And it's really important to select a community problem that is solvable. Make sure it's not too big to work on. And when we say choose a problem that helps your community, it's just that. It could be something that helps your backyard, your school, your town, your city, of course, your state. But it's really important to look around and see what ways that you can think of to use STEM to solve a local problem. So let's see, we've got a question in the chat. Can we use a citation building platform like Noodle tools to create our citation? That's a great question. So to my knowledge, we don't require you to use MLA format. That's just kind of the one that comes to mind. So as long as you have your sources cited somehow, so you'll need to have the name of the source when you looked at it. If it's an online source, you'll need to have that URL. As long as you have all that in there and we're able to find what that source is, you are good to go. Great question. And if you guys have any other questions, feel free to put those in the chat. We'll do our best to answer those for you. So on the screen here, I do have a little note that says check out the Inspiration Station. If you have not yet heard of the Inspiration Station, give me a question mark in the chat. I want to see how many of you guys know about it. Oh, okay. So I see a few question marks. That's good. So the Inspiration Station is actually found on the eCYBERMISSION website. And what it is it's a spot you can go to get ideas for your team. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys where to find that. I'm going to close out of my slide here. So when you go to eCYBERMISSION.com, I'll show you the pathway of how to get to it. You're going to click on students right here. And you don't have to be logged in to see this. And then you can click on Student Help Center. And that's going to take you to an amazing page. There's so much information on here that's really helpful for your team. But specifically, the Inspiration Station is right here. So if you click on that, it's going to take you to a whole sheet of ways that your team can kind of come up with ideas for your project. So it's really helpful. I'm going to put the direct link to that Inspiration Station PDF in the chat for you guys. So make sure to check that out. Now there's another really great spot also found in the Student Help Center. I'll go ahead and put that link in here too. It's just below the Inspiration Station. So if you're still brainstorming, selecting a topic is a Google Doc that will show up. And this one is good if you're really starting out with your team and you're not quite sure even what questions to ask. So make sure you check out those Inspiration Station and selecting a topic documents if you are still in the brainstorming stage for your research. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this back up here. I know I've been bouncing around a little bit. I love that you guys have been asking questions in the chat. This is so great. I want to give our cyber guides just a minute to maybe talk about anything that I might have missed when it comes to looking for sources. We've talked a little bit about how to make sure sources are credible with making sure to use like .gov or .edu websites. Make sure any articles you're citing are recently published. Are there any other suggestions or tips that you guys have for students who are looking for online sources?
Yeah, Lauren, I think a good thing that you mentioned is when you're collecting your sources, do it like during your process. Don't like wait till the end and be like, oh, I need like my 5 to 10 sources and then just pick some things. Like really, when you're doing the research, make sure to document your sources because they're really hard to find sometimes after, you know, say you read an article that you really liked and it helped guide some of the work you did, but you might not be able to find it like later on after the fact. So make sure to document as you go and it'll help you a lot.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Ryan. I will actually make it a little bit more intense and say write everything down. That's really been helpful for me just to literally write. I mean, take notes on everything. It's for me, it's better to have unnecessary notes that you don't need in the future than to, you know, not have something that you really needed, you know. So it's better to overtake notes than to undertake them, if you know what I mean. So try your best to, as you go along, write down it doesn't have to be like handwritten. You can, copy and paste into a Word document or into, even like a notepad, something on your computer. As long as you keep track of what you're doing, that's going to be really helpful.
That is so true. And I know a lot of us are still working virtually. And so having those collaborative notes maybe shared with your team is really important too. So if you're using Google Docs or Google Sheets to keep track of some of your notes and research, just remember to share the permissions for editing with your teammates so they can also collaborate and contribute to those. I love that. If we have any other questions about sources, throw those in the chat because I'm going to move on to how we can help you answer questions if you have any. So you might have seen a few posts on social media or gotten some emails about Cronus, but Cronus is a cool app that eCYBERMISSION students have access to. And it is an app that lets you connect with our cyber guides like Aiden Relay and Ronnie and Ryan. They're all on Cronus and they are STEM experts. So if you have questions about science or technology, engineering, math, maybe you have questions about biology or coding or other topics, we have other cyber guides that have really cool jobs, just like our cyber guides here tonight, and they're all able to answer those questions and connect with you. So I want to make sure that you guys know about that. There's even a cool feature in Cronus where, of course, you can message our cyber guides and ask them STEM related questions, but you can also post questions just to anyone in the community forum. So I'm going to show you a little bit about what that looks like and show you how to get signed up. So when you go into Cronus, which you won't be able to unless you email me, I'll give you my email in a minute. But when you go into Cronus, you'll be able to see a list of cyber guides that you could talk to, or you can click on the community tab here on the menu on the left, and it'll take you to something called forums. So forums are open to our eCYBERMISSION students and cyber guides, and you can connect with teams just like you all over the country. So we've got a few different topics in here already. I always post when there's a cyber guide live chat coming up with the link so you won't miss it. And then there's some little sections where you can actually talk to people in your grade all over the US. And if you had a question that was maybe about citing sources or rules or forms that you needed, you could put that in the community forum. And eCYBERMISSION staff are also in there and can answer those. So Cronus is really cool. If you're interested in connecting with our cyber guides on Cronus, you can email, and I'll put the email in the chat, volunteerprogram@eCYBERMISSION.com. Putting that in here right now. And once you email and say, hey, I'm interested in Cronus, we'll send you a link and it'll let you sign up. So make sure to check out Cronus. The actual link is in the slide as well. It's pretty long, but just shoot me an email to volunteerprogram@eCYBERMISSION.com if you're wanting to connect. We did get a great question, unrelated to Cronus, but about experiments. So if my team can't find a lab for our experiment, is it okay if we test the experiment using test kits at home? That is a great question. And yes, if you are not able to access a lab, you can definitely use test kits at home. Just make sure before you start your experiment to actually fill out your risk assessment form with your team advisor. So let me show you where you can find that. So if you go to eCYBERMISSION and you already are registered, all you need to do is just log in here as a student, and you'll be able to see a list of forms by your mission folder. Since I'm not registered as a student right now, I'm going to show you another spot where you can find those forms, and I will put those links in the chat. So in section 6 of the rules, I'll put that in the chat for you guys. In section 6, there's a spot called risk assessment. This is really important. This form has to be filled out prior to beginning any testing. So whether or not you're testing in a lab or if you're testing at home, you'll need to fill out that risk assessment form before you start testing. So we can just go to that competition rules link I put in the chat for you guys, and then go to section 6 and click on risk assessment. That'll get you set up and good to go. Now, like I said, if you're already registered, all you'll have to do is just log in as a student, click on your mission folder, and you'll see a list of those forms appear right in your home page. Amazing questions, y'all. If you have any more questions, feel free to put those in the chat. All right, see another one come in. If we need a lab to conduct our experiment, where would be a place we could do it? Great question. So that's a question for your team advisor. Your team advisor would be able to probably give you more guidance on where you could find a place to do your experiment. They might have some connections at a school or maybe a community club or organization. So I would start with asking your team advisor that question. All right, so once again, if you're interested in Cronus, go ahead and email volunteer program at eCYBERMISSION.com. You can send me an email tonight and I'll get back to you soon. Our next live chat is going to take place on November 17th, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern, and we'll be moving a little bit away from the setting up our mission folder and getting some more STEM inspiration from our cyber guide. So we'll be talking with cyber guide engineers on November 17th. Make sure you come. And if you have questions in the meantime, mission control at eCYBERMISSION.com is your friend. You can email mission control anytime if you have questions about the risk assessment form or how to start up safely. If you have any questions about the rules, make sure to email mission control. All right, I want to thank our cyber guides for coming. I know I talked a lot this evening, but I really appreciated your insight. And if you guys want to say anything else before we wrap up, feel free. Other than that, I just want to thank you all for being here and helping out.
Quick question for you. Is there a safety forum for people who are doing the design thing?
Great question. Yes. So if your project is following that engineering design path, you'll still need to fill out the same risk assessment forms. You can use the same links in the chat for earlier. So whether or not you're doing engineering design or scientific inquiry, you fill out the same forms.
Okay, thank you.
Great question. Any other questions? I see one in the chat. If your team is having trouble choosing a topic, where can we go? Oh, fantastic question. So let me show you that pathway again. So if you go to eCYBERMISSION.com and you click on students, you see at the bottom, there's a spot called Student Help Center. I'll put the link for the Student Help Center in the chat here. Specifically, I would go to the Inspiration Station. I'll put that link in here as well. That's a great spot to start with your team if you kind of want to talk through the process of figuring out where to begin and get some ideas. And then as you're thinking about selecting a topic, there's the link for our resource on that. And all of these are again found in the Student Help Center. And for any team advisors on tonight, we do have a Team Advisor Help Center as well with some amazing resources. So if any team advisors are in here, got a link for the Advisor Help Center in there too. Fantastic question. Any other questions?
One quick question. When should we have our topic selected by? What date?
So there isn't a cutoff date for selecting your topic. That's really up to your team and what you think you can achieve and your goal. But you will need to submit your mission folder in March. So I believe it's March 2nd. Catherine, is that correct?
Yes, it's March 2nd.
Okay, cool. Yeah. March 2nd, 2022 is when mission folders are due. And I'm putting that date in here. So really just, I would discuss with your team and try to figure out what your goals are for figuring out your project, because we don't really have a cutoff for our teams where you have to choose something by a certain date. That's really up to you guys. Great question. Any other questions?
I put something in the chat. I know this is a bit unrelated to the topic we're covering today, but our team was wondering about when we would hear back about the mini grant.
That's a great question. So our mini grant applications are still open right now, and they will be open until November 15. So sometime in the weeks following November 15 is when your team would hear. And Catherine, if you had any further elaboration on that, feel free to jump in.
No, what she said's correct. We're in the process of reviewing applications as they come in. If you would like, your team advisor can email missioncontrol@eCYBERMISSION.com, and we can provide some more information on the status of it and if we did receive it and if there's any questions that we might have.
Okay, thank you so much.
Amazing questions. And we did get a question about what a mini grant is. So I'll show you where to find that as well. So mini grants are part of our team advisor resources that we have here at eCYBERMISSION. And I'm putting the link to that information in the chat here. It's basically a grant that provides funding for teachers who are implementing eCYBERMISSION into their classroom. So really cool. If you are a team advisor and you haven't heard about it, make sure to check out that link there. And you will need to apply by November 15. All right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up our recording, but I'm going to be here to answer any more questions. I want to thank our cyber guides so much for joining this evening, and I wish you all a wonderful Wednesday. Hope to see you again on our next live chat on November 17th. Thanks everyone and have a great evening.
A quick question.